What's going on, YouTube, and welcome back to our Goal Line Hockey Power Rankings. It is Kevin Forte, and today we are going to be doing our Week 3, October 29th. October 22nd was last week. October 29th, 2023 Power Rankings. So, we have a couple of announcements here. Guys, make sure to like and subscribe to the video. It would help us out a ton here at Goal Line Hockey to get more people here on the channel to help out the algorithm. Also, want to give a little tidbit here to Adam Johnson. He passed away last night. Had a skate blade to his throat during a game over in Europe. And our thoughts and prayers are with him and his family. And I just want to give a moment of silence before we get into this week's Power Rankings. Okay, guys, so let's get right into it. And so on that note, let's try to be a little bit more positive because it is just a few days here before Halloween. And I hope you guys like the little background for this week's Power Rankings. So we're going to start off at number 32, and once again, it's the San Jose Sharks. The Sharks just, they tried. They're trying, and they're just not, they're not up to snuff this season. We kind of knew that going in, that this was going to be a tough year for the Sharks, and once again, they find themselves at the bottom of our Power Rankings this week for the third consecutive week. The thing with the Sharks that's really got to be frustrating is this is a team that now, through the first 8 games of their season, has yet to win a game. Their goals for is last in the NHL, and their goals against is third worst. So they're giving up a ton of goals. They're not scoring a lot, and that's why they have yet to win a game this season. It's been a really rough season so far for the San Jose Sharks, and that's been pretty evident with how things have gone for this team thus far. Number 31 is the Washington Capitals. I have a little bit more optimism for the Caps, but not much. That's not really saying much. The Capitals did end up, they played last night, Friday night. They played Friday night, and they beat the Minnesota Wild. So if anything, maybe they should be a little bit higher than even this. But the Capitals are struggling a lot. They did get a win the other night against the Devils too, which that was actually a pretty big win. But I just still see this team, they just look slow. And despite a couple of wins here and there, they are still not where they need to be if they really want to make a legitimate run. In this division, it's going to be really difficult for the Caps. So I still have them quite low in our power rankings. Number 30 is the Seattle Kraken. It's been a rough season for the Kraken. Things have not gone off to a good start for them either. This is another team that's just kind of the lack of goal scoring, and the defense has just not been where they need it to be. The goaltending hasn't been all that great either. There's just been a lot of things not going their way. They're giving up a lot of goals this year. 29th in that category, just ahead of the San Jose Sharks. So Seattle is another team that just, we knew they weren't going to be great this season probably, but this is like a really atrocious start for them. And they're kind of falling back to that first season form that I think a lot of Kraken fans were unfortunately a little bit afraid of. Number 29 is the Calgary Flames. Calgary is really struggling this season too. It's been a rough start for them. And, not much of a surprise here. I kind of expected them to be toward the bottom of the standings, but I just think there's a lot of things with this team that I don't know if it's necessarily going to get fixed quickly either. There's a lot of talk that a Noah Hannafin contract could be on the way here shortly, and that would be really nice news for the Calgary Flames because that would mean their future is a little bit more certain than it is right now. So we'll see how things go for the Calgary Flames, but as of right now, the goaltending hasn't been great. They haven't been scoring enough, and unfortunately, they've been finding themselves in a lot of games that they could maybe win, and they haven't been able to. And that game against the Capitals, a glaring example of that. Number 28 is the Chicago Blackhawks. So the Blackhawks, I think, are a team that I'm a little bit more optimistic about, and I could see them moving up. They're a team that is still struggling. the last 2 weeks, we're really starting to see that this is the real Blackhawks team compared to what we saw through the first week of the season, where they actually looked pretty good. They're not scoring enough. Their defense is actually playing well, and their goaltending is actually doing fairly well, but they're not scoring enough. And again, a lot of that is just you have a very young team here, and when a lot of their scoring is going to be reliant on guys like Connor Bedard, Taylor Hall, who's been injured, Andreas Athanasiou, like there's just not enough scoring depth there. And they did get a win over the Golden Knights, an overtime victory in Vegas to hand the Golden Knights their first loss of the season, which is huge for the Blackhawks. But other than that, this team has not won since October 16th. So it's been almost 2 weeks since the Blackhawks have won a game. But other than that, oh no, it hasn't been 2 weeks. It's been a week. It's been a week since they've last won a game. And, they really needed that game in Vegas. That's a huge confidence boost for them. And I think that's a game they could really build some momentum off of. And I think the fans are probably a little bit shocked. Both the Golden Knights fans that they lost and the fact that the Blackhawks won. I'm sure the Blackhawks fans were quite happy with that result. Number 27 is the St. Louis Blues. So the Blues, I've been kind of torn on. I really don't like a lot of the things with this team so far. Their penalty kill is doing well, kind of how we would expect. Their power play on 21 attempts has only had one power play goal, so less than 5% on the power play, that's like really low. That's astonishingly low. That's something that needs to get better for this team, especially when you have guys like Robert Thomas and Jordan Kyrou on this team. You want to see more from those guys. The production really hasn't been good enough from guys like Brandon Saad, Sammy Blais, Pavel Buchnevich, Kevin Hayes, yet to record a goal yet for the Blues. Like, those are the kind of things that definitely leave you concerned. And the fact that the goaltending of Binnington has been as good as it's been, that's even more concerning. Because if his goaltending's been as good as it's been and they're still not playing well, that is really concerning. There's a team that just doesn't score enough goals. And despite having pretty good goals against and being a pretty good defensive team, it doesn't matter if you can't score enough. And that's kind of been the situation so far for the Blues. The Columbus Blue Jackets, saw them last night against the Islanders. It's gonna be another long season for the Blue Jackets. Another situation where their defense is okay, but they can't score enough, and they got shut out against the New York Islanders. Semyon Varlamov and the Islanders. That's a good hockey team over there. You can't give all the credit. You can't completely say the Blue Jackets are just a horrible team. They played a good team in the Islanders, but the reality is you got to find a way to score, and right now they have not been able to do that enough. And this is now their second shutout already of the season. They got shut out against the Red Wings earlier this month, and now this is already their second shutout of the season on home ice, and that's a little concerning if I'm a Blue Jackets fan. Number 25. Speaking of concerning, the Edmonton Oilers are. I really should have them lower on this rankings, right? They are 1-5-1 to start the season. They've won one game. And ever since that first game against the Canucks, we should have known that this could be a real problem here. Connor McDavid's now injured. He's out. And that's really concerning. And their most recent effort, a very uninspired last couple of games. They lost to the Winnipeg Jets, the Philadelphia Flyers, the Minnesota Wild, in really embarrassing fashion. A 7-4 loss to the Wild, and then a 3-0 shutout loss, their first shutout loss of the season against the Rangers. Now they play the game at Commonwealth Stadium tonight, here Sunday on the 29th. This is a game where Calgary and Edmonton are both playing terrible, so somebody's got to get out of the slump tonight. But the Edmonton Oilers need this game more than anything in the world. You're playing at home in Edmonton. Your fans are going to be there. You got to find a way to win this game without McDavid. It's not even like they could really use this one to build momentum. Like, this is like fire alarms are sounding time in Edmonton, and it sounds dramatic because we're only 7 games into the season. This is their 8th game of the season, but this is unacceptable. This is unacceptable for the Edmonton Oilers. They have 3 points this season. It's unfathomable what we've seen from the Oilers so far this year. All right, number 24 is Nashville. Nashville also struggling here out of the gate. Not really surprising to a lot of people, but they are 4-4, so they're stumbling their way along. Cody Glass and Luke Schenn are out with injuries, both lower body injuries. That obviously hasn't helped their cause, but they had an inspiring win the other night over the Toronto Maple Leafs, a 3-2 victory in overtime over the Leafs. They played a pretty good game against a good Vancouver Canucks team. They didn't come away with the win in that one, but it was a close game nonetheless. They beat the Rangers and the Sharks before that, so they've had a couple of pretty good games since that Edmonton loss. But other than that, you'd like to see a little bit more from Nashville in the scoring department, but they come out in waves. They have they had a 4-goal win, a 5-goal effort, 3 goals the other night against Toronto. Now they start that Western Canadian road trip. They play Vancouver, Seattle, Edmonton, Calgary, and Winnipeg before heading back home for a long stretch of home games. They're going to play on the road for a little bit here this week to start November. This is a big week here for the Nashville Predators, and a chance for them to really build up some momentum up to the end of 2023. The Pittsburgh Penguins, rough season so far for Pittsburgh. They started out of the gate okay, and now we're starting to see the concerns that we had for Pittsburgh really coming on to the forefront. They are 3-5 to start this season. They're currently 8th in the Metropolitan Division. A couple of injuries have really started to make things worse for the Penguins. John Ludwig out with a concussion. He was out Saturday against Ottawa. Alex Nedeljkovic and Mark Pysyk. That is the latest. Nedeljkovic placed on the injured reserve. So Pittsburgh already calling up their 3rd goaltender. It's been a rough start for the Penguins. The goaltending hasn't been good enough. Their power play hasn't been good enough. Their penalty kill has been very good, which is not too surprising considering some of the acquisitions they made in the offseason. I like some of the guys that Pittsburgh brought in. Definitely guys like Riley Smith coming in, Lars Eller. Those guys are going to help you out on the penalty kill, and they've done that so far. Sidney Crosby and Malkin and Gensel leading the way in points. That is the optimistic side of things. But other than that, you'd like to see more production from guys like Letang and Carlson for how much offensive prowess they have and their lack of defensive abilities. You'd like to see them producing a little bit more up front. And their stats are pretty good in the middle. I wouldn't necessarily be sounding the fire alarms for Pittsburgh yet. It's panic mode, but not necessarily fire alarms, full-blown attack mode. But, their goals for is 18th. Their goals against is 16th. They're right in the middle of the pack. So the ability to move up isn't a curb that is too high. It's just they need to get a little bit better and clean up some of their areas. And I think they'll be a little bit better there. But the question is this team capable of that? Has the Leopard doesn't change its spots too much. And we look at this defense, we know what this team is capable of. They're going to rely a lot on scoring goals this year. Number 22 is the Florida Panthers. The Florida Panthers are one of those teams right now where I'd like to put them higher, but I haven't been impressed by what I've seen from them. They've had a couple games here and there where you're kind of thinking to yourself, if they could just, play this way the rest of the season, right? Like, if they can score 2 or 3 goals a game and just be good enough with the goaltending, it seems like they can do that. And they've done that through 3 of their past 4 games. They have been able to do that. Actually, in fact, 4 of their past 5 games, they have been able to do that. A 4-3 win over the Devils, a 3-1 win over the Leafs, a 3-1 win over the Sharks, and a 3-2 win over the Kraken. Those are some inspiring efforts for the Florida Panthers to start off the month of November here. They're going to be playing the Boston Bruins, the Red Wings, and the Blackhawks, a couple of original 6 teams in the Northeast/Midwest. And, a pretty road-heavy schedule up until December. So, there's going to be a little bit of a test here for the Florida Panthers. They're facing some adversity to begin with some of their injuries. Sam Bennett, Ekblad, and Montour all out. Obviously, Sam Bennett being the most recent addition to that list. Hopefully he's okay. He was listed as out against the Seattle Kraken on Saturday, and hopefully we'll get more of an update here early this week on Sam Bennett. Number 21 is the Jets. So the Jets have really not given me much excitement either. They're staying right around the middle of the pack. Their goals against needs to improve. They're giving up a lot of goals. Their goals for is actually okay. It's in the upper half of the league. If anything, I would have expected this stat to be the other way. You know, they're not scoring enough, but keeping the puck out of the net, which is a little bit odd. But hey, leaves room for improvement, right, on the defense. Their 3-game winning streak was snapped on Saturday against the Montreal Canadiens, but they did pick up a point in that game. You know, the key, again, similar to the Florida Panthers, I think these two teams are eerily similar in the sense that you want to keep the goal. If you could score 3 goals and just have your goaltending do enough to keep the puck out of the net and maybe only give up 1 or 2 goals, they're going to win a lot of those close games. And they have been able to do that for the most part this season. But there have been a couple of games that have kind of gotten out of hand. They've already had 4 games this season where they've given up 4 goals or more. And they've given up 5 goals in 3 of those 4 games. Got to clean that up. They're giving up a lot of goals here in bunches. But then they have a couple of games where they gave up 1 or 2 goals. And that was on that most recent winning streak. So there is room for improvement here. There is room here for the Jets to say, hey, very quickly next week, they could be moving up 5 or 6 spots in our power rankings. And I think that's kind of one of those things where the Jets are in this middle of the pack situation right now. They could definitely be one of the teams I think that could move up very quickly as soon as next week. Number 20, Anaheim. Anaheim moved up quite a significant amount from last week. You guys remember they were the bottom 5 the last couple of weeks, and I'm starting to see some real things that I like about the Ducks that are pretty inspiring. A couple of inspiring efforts for the Anaheim Ducks. It's going to be a long season for the Ducks, I think, as well, but their record is 4-4, and I think they're one of the better teams that is 500 on their schedule. Now, a couple of really nice victories here over the past week for the Anaheim Ducks. They beat the Blue Jackets. They beat the Bruins in overtime. That's a tough team to beat in Boston. And then they followed that up with a win in Philadelphia where the Flyers have actually looked pretty good to start the season. So that's actually those are 2 back-to-back quality wins on the road for the Anaheim Ducks. They're going to be finishing up this road trip against Pittsburgh tomorrow, Monday afternoon. And then they play home for the most of the month of November. The Ducks will be home. So a real opportunity for them to continue to build, stay at 500 and maybe build up on that a little bit, get a little bit above 500. And they're going to have a lot of road games in December, early December. So it's important that I think they stack up the wins here in November, build up some confidence, especially for some of those young guys. It's nice seeing guys like Mason McTavish getting on the board, scoring a couple goals. Frank Vatrano already with a hat trick. He seems to be doing quite well. So those things are going well for the Anaheim Ducks. And if they keep up, the Ducks, kind of like the Jets, they're kind of a seesaw team. They move up, they move down. They move up, they move down. Once we see a little bit more consistency, we'll probably figure out where this team is really at. But as of right now, I like what I've seen from the Ducks. The Arizona Coyotes. The Coyotes are playing pretty well too. Again, a team that is kind of in the middle of the pack. A couple of games have really made me a little bit concerned. But their goals against is really good. Top 10 in the NHL for goals against. But when you combine all the recent injuries that have been accumulating, Travis Dermott and Lawson Krause were out Friday. So hopefully that it's listed as just an illness. So there might be some kind of flu bug or injury bug or stomach bug going through. So hopefully everything's okay with that. But that could be something that maybe sets them back this coming week. So I did account for that. This team is pretty good on the penalty kill. Well, they're very above average on the power play. So if those things keep up, the Coyotes, man, might surprise some people. They have given up a lot of goals the last 2 games, and like I said, some of that might be because of guys like Krause and Dermott being out. I'm sure that doesn't help the situation all that much. But they've given up 11 goals in this recent back-to-back with the LA Kings. Got to clean that up. Moving up into our top 18, the Minnesota Wild, Shout out to Urban in the chat. He was a big guy this morning with our live stream, which unfortunately wasn't working. That's why we're doing the pre-record here. But the Minnesota Wild are really concerning me. They lost to the Capitals the other night. I definitely took that into account. They lost. They just seem slow. They seem really slow out of the gate. And now all these injuries are starting to add up. And the latest addition to that list is Frederick Gauthier, who has an upper body. Freddie Gauthier. Freddie Gaudreau is listed on. He is not with the team on its current road trip, and that was back on Wednesday. But last week we had injuries to Caden Banquier, Matthew Boldy, Alex Goligoski. So they've had a lot of injuries here over the last 2 weeks, and it's really starting to catch up with this team that already hasn't been playing their best hockey. Their special teams, power play, penalty kill, got to get a little bit better. I'm a little concerned about the Wild, I have to say. And the good thing for this team is... Philip Gustafson, who looked good, he had a shutout early on. But since then, his numbers and Fleury's numbers have not been good enough. 8.88 save percentage between the two of them. That's got to get better if the Minnesota Wild want to make a run this season. The Philadelphia Flyers starting to come back down to earth this week. Like I said, they most recently lost Saturday against the Anaheim Ducks. They've given up 7 goals in that game. That was a tough one for the Philadelphia Flyers. But you know what? The fact they're even at where they are is pretty impressive. Not really what I was expecting. But that's a John Tortorella team to a T, right? Ellis and Ristolainen still injured. The most recent addition to that is Mark Stahl. He's out with a rib injury. All those guys are on the injured reserve, so hopefully we'll see them come back. I'm sure that's starting to have an effect on this team. The fact you have that many guys out with injuries, it is going to hurt you. Number 16 is the Montreal Canadiens. The Montreal Canadiens have been okay. They've had a couple of close games here and there recently. They've been picking up points here and there in games that maybe they didn't even deserve points. So I give credit where it's due. And the Montreal Canadiens, not too bad with how they've started off this year. I'm impressed with what I've seen. Same thing with the Buffalo Sabres. Buffalo is an example of a team that, yeah, they're 3-5 on their record, but I think they're better than their record indicates. A couple of those games were really hard-fought games for the Sabres. The goaltending really hasn't been that good. That's been the one real criticism for the Buffalo Sabres, but they played a tight game against the Devils the other day. They played a tight game against the Islanders last Saturday in the Islanders home opener. They beat the Islanders after that, so there is reason for optimism for this Buffalo Sabres team. They're systematically pretty good, in my opinion. It's just a matter of them finding ways to get the wins and get the points. And they just haven't been able to do that so far this season. And I think they're a victim of their own, just the lack of experience on this team is pretty evident with some of those guys. And I think as those guys get through the growing pains and can kind of get things going, we're going to see a better hockey team as things move forward. But I'm pretty optimistic still with Buffalo despite their record. Same thing for Ottawa. Ottawa's shown a lot of fight in a couple of these tough games. They seem to be finding a little bit of momentum recently, but they gotta keep the puck out of the net, and that's been a big thing so far. Korpisalo has had his moments, both good and bad so far in his career with Ottawa. So as long as things continue to move forward for them, I think the Senators are going to be okay. But, again, kind of like Buffalo, you got to find a way to get more wins in those tight games, and they just haven't been able to do that quite yet. Tampa Bay is the opposite of both Buffalo and Ottawa, and that's why they're ahead of both of them. Is there are a couple games where Tampa maybe shouldn't win those games, and they find a way to win those games. They're 4-2-2 so far this season, and again, a lot of that comes back to, yes, John Cooper is the coach, but also, just the veteran leadership of this team. The last 2 games combined, they are 9. They've scored 9 goals, given up 0 in the past 2 games against Carolina and San Jose. They've seemed to have cleaned things up since that Buffalo game. They've been giving up a lot of goals, but Philip Johansson, Jonas Johansson. Jonas Johansson, the goalie, his numbers have been really, really good here over this past week. And I think that's an indicator that things could be turning around for the Tampa Bay Lightning. A lot of questions about that goalie tandem. Things did not look good to start, but we could be seeing a little bit of a confidence boost coming for Johansson and that goalie tandem in Tampa, and that's concerning for the rest of the league. But so far, they've looked pretty good. The Islanders, a really impressive win, a 2-0 win over the Blue Jackets. That's a team you have to beat, but to get a shutout win over the Blue Jackets on the road in Columbus is nice to see for the Islanders. Again, they've had their moments. They lost that game against the Devils. Really bad penalty kill for the Islanders. I have not been impressed with that at all. Just, they have the puck. They finally get the puck, and then they try to dump it out of the zone to clear it, and they immediately give it back to the team and don't get it over the blue line. Those are the things that'll bite you in the butt as the season goes along for the Islanders. But so far, Sorokin and Varlamov have been the best goalie tandem in the league. They have been. And, I think as long as the Islanders continue to get that type of level of goaltending, the Islanders are going to have a shot in every game they play. It's just, can they score enough and get those timely goals? And so far, they have been able to do that enough where, kind of similar to Buffalo and Ottawa, where the Islanders have been able to win some of those games that are close, but they've also dropped games that you're like, we left points on the table in that one. So that's kind of where the Islanders are at. Detroit fell back down to earth this week. They've played well, but we're starting to see the regression just a little bit. It was a rough week for the Red Wings. They're still playing well, no doubt about that. A 5-3-1 record is still quite good. The defense has looked good. A couple of things have been going their way, but like I said, this past week, things have started to go downward. Since those two games last week against Ottawa and Calgary, a 5-4 overtime loss against Seattle, a 4-1 loss to the Jets, and a 4-1 loss to the Bruins. They play the Islanders on Monday night. That's going to be a big game here for the Red Wings. They got to find a way to claw that one out. That's going to be a big one on Long Island. Then they play a couple of divisional opponents. They play Florida and Boston heading into December. So, there's no room for the weary here in Detroit, as well as the rest of the league. So the Red Wings can't complain and sit around too long. Really been impressed with what I've seen from DeBrincat. Really impressed from what I've seen from Gostisbehere and Seider. This team needs to continue to play well. If that belief in the fan base is there, they got to keep it going though. Number 10 is Carolina. Despite that game the other night, where they got shut out against Tampa Bay, I'm still impressed with what I've seen from Carolina. They're definitely rounding the corner. It was a little bit of a bumpy first 2 weeks or so, week and a half for the Carolina Hurricanes. But now we're seeing Rod Brendamore's team get into focus, get into form. And the Carolina Hurricanes are definitely a team to watch for. The Islanders, the Rangers, the Devils, the Hurricanes are all playing quite well. And I think that Carolina is going to start to assert themselves as we move forward going into November and through the rest of the season. I think they just got off to a tough start. Number 9 is Vancouver. Vancouver's looked really solid. Thatcher Demko with another shutout. Really impressed with what I've seen from Demko. Is this finally the season he could win the Vezina for the best goalie? We could see it. It could happen here. So we'll see what happens with Demko. Definitely interested to see how things go, kind of move forward with his progression. But that's definitely one to watch for. Number 8 is Toronto. Kind of a weird season so far for the Leafs. They've had good moments, but, in the house. We always talk about the house. In between the dots and the crease, the Leafs need to be more aggressive and tougher to play against in that spot defensively because they're leaving their goaltending out to dry a lot. That's got to get better if they want to win more games. And they did lose Saturday. So there's reason for concern. Not to a huge degree, especially with Nylander and Matthews playing the way they have been so far. They've been really good. But defensively, you got to find a way to play a little bit better in your own end. Number 7 is the Los Angeles Kings. Really inspired with what I've seen from them so far. The goaltending's been a little bit shaky at points, but they've scored enough goals to keep things in front of them, playing well enough to win hockey games and win some of these games. Like I said, inspiring wins for the Kings. Scoring a lot of goals in those games. They have the second most goals for in the National Hockey League. But they've been able to kind of overcome the deficit of a lack of goaltending with that goal scoring. How sustainable is that? we're going to see as the season moves along. Number 6 is Dallas. These next two teams, the Dallas Stars and the New Jersey Devils, have only played 6 games compared to a lot of teams that have played 8 or 9 games so far. So their record is a little bit deceptive, but I really like what I've seen so far from the Dallas Stars. Jake Ottinger doing what he does. The rest of this team, guys like we've seen a lot from Jason Robertson, and that defense is really solid, jumping in, producing and being a threat. That's going to be the continual storyline for the Dallas Stars. And, this is going to be a top 10 team when it's all said and done at the end of the season. I just think with the way the Central Division is right now, I think Dallas is in a really good position with where they're at. And you look at where Dallas is, right? It's Dallas and Colorado in the Central. And that's it. Nobody else really seems to be close. So, and you could kind of see that with our power rankings. It's, Colorado, Dallas, and then Minnesota is at 18. That is the next Central Division team, which is just crazy, but that's where we are right now. Speaking of the Devils, at number 5 is the New Jersey Devils. I like what I've seen from the Devils. Again, that game against Buffalo, they had to kind of grind that one out. They grinded that win out against the Islanders. Jack Hughes has been really good. Luke Hughes has been really good. Everything seems to be going well for them. Vanacek needs to be a little bit better in between the pipes. I'd like to see him kind of pick up his game. Same thing for Akira Schmid. But as long as the goaltending, they're similar to the Kings in that sense where they're scoring enough. Can their goaltending bail them out as the season moves forward on a night where maybe they only score 1 or 2 goals? That's going to be the real question moving forward. The New York Rangers, man, Peter Laviolette seems to be kicking that team in the ass a little bit. Their record has really improved over the last 2 weeks. They've played a lot better. They're currently on the Western Canadian road trip. And we're starting to see that the Rangers can win hockey games. A dominant win over the Edmonton Oilers, 3-0. A gutsy win over the Vancouver Canucks, a 4-3 overtime win. Chris Kreider's getting on the board. We're seeing the young guys sporadically getting on the board. And that's something that has to improve, I think, if I had a critique for the Rangers, is seeing more from Hedel and Lafreniere and Kakko. If those guys can play to the level we think they are capable of, the Rangers are going to be really, really good this year, but I still have them in the top 5. I think from what I've seen from the Rangers this Western Canadian road trip, there's a lot that I really like from them. Again, some of those teams aren't playing that well. Calgary, Edmonton, and Vancouver's a good team. They're a top 10 team here, but keep an eye out on the Rangers. I think, Jonathan Quick playing well is really going to help complement Igor Shesterkin. Those are all things that are really going well for the Rangers. Number 3 is staying the same. Our top 3 stays the same. Boston at 3. They continue to win games. They finally had their first loss the other night, but that's A-okay in my opinion. They lose to the Anaheim Ducks. They're kind of on a hot streak right now, beating the Flyers and the Bruins, who are both good teams in the Northeast. So it's going to happen. They were bound to lose a game eventually, but no threat from me. I think that the Boston Bruins are one of the threats once again in the Atlantic Division. So everybody hoping that maybe Boston would fall off this year without Bergeron and Krejci. We might have to wait a little bit longer on that one because things are going quite well up there. And shout out to Jim Montgomery and Brad Marchand and McAvoy. The leadership team there in Boston has really done their part so far. Number 2 is Colorado. Again, they've shown vulnerability. They finally lost their first game of the season, but they're playing really well. They had a close game against the Islanders this past week. There were definitely some breakdowns, but they find a way to win games, and that's what the good teams do. That's what separates you from Ottawa, Buffalo, the Islanders, even Carolina for a little bit, the Leafs a little bit. You find a way to win games, and that's what we've seen from teams like Boston, Colorado, the Rangers, and of course, the Vegas Golden Knights. Of course, the Golden Knights are at number 1 once again. I just haven't seen enough from anybody to separate these two teams right now. There is the top tier, which is Vegas and Colorado, and then everybody else. And right now, I kind of look at teams like Boston, the Rangers, the Devils, really being in their own tier in the top 5. But Vegas and Colorado are still on their own. They are mowing over teams right now, and I'm sure that'll cool off as the season goes along. But even in games that are tight, they don't get nervous. It's not like, oh, shit, we're going to lose. Like, they find ways to win even when it looks like things aren't going their way. And that's a huge credit to both the Golden Knights and the Avalanche so far this year. Really like what I've seen from those two teams. And we're starting to see a little bit of a separation for some of these teams in the middle of the pack. Some teams still sorting it out in the middle there. But guys, that's going to do it for today's stream. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. I will see you guys again next week for our Week 4 Power Rankings in November. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a very, very happy Halloween, and I'll see you guys again next week. Peace out, guys.